Hello, welcome back to another episode of Ask the Doctor with Dr. Jeffrey Sherman. Hello, Dr. Sherman, how are you?
Good, thanks. How are you? Good to be with you.
Yes, today we have a very exciting show. We're going to be talking about vaccines because of how much development there has been recently and talk about vaccines. We would like to bring this information out, clarify things, and maybe provide more details that you might not easily find in the news. Before we get going, though, I would like to say the COVID-19 statistics as of the 20th of November for the United States. There has been 11.9 million cases of COVID-19 in the United States, and there's 253,000 deaths. And that's the number that we're really concerned about because there's been almost 2,000 new deaths in the past day. And that number, we want to keep that number as low as possible. And that's why everyone's been super scared about this winter season. And that's also why it's so exciting that new vaccines are very close and very promising to finishing.
Sure.
So I would like to start off, Dr. Sherman, by asking, I guess, what it takes for a vaccine to be finished, as in after all the first phases have happened already.
Well, the vaccine, any vaccine or any drug goes through basically three phases of what they call clinical trials to try to make sure, see if they work and see if they're safe. One is just the question and organizing the study. We'll give some people this medicine and some people not, or what are we going to measure in terms of how effective it is? What are we going to measure in terms of side effects and things that you like? So that's phase one, like outlining the study and seeing what your endpoint's going to be and what some things you want to note are along the way in terms of side effects and safety. Then phase two, you're going to recruit some patients to, in low numbers to see how it goes. Are the patients responding? Are they coming down with any funny side effects in low numbers? And then you open it up to the phase three, where you open it up to thousands of patients, regardless of, you've checked out if it's safe, and you're just going to give 15,000 patients the medicine and 15,000 patients nothing, or a control, and you're going to, measure these outcomes. The best way to do these studies is nobody knows what the patient gets. Does this patient get the treatment group? Does this patient get what we call the control group, or nothing? They're both taking the same thing. In this case of vaccines, everybody's getting a shot in the arm, but somebody's getting a shot of the real thing, and somebody's getting a shot of, salt water,
Yeah, the placebo.
Yeah. So, but the person administering the shot doesn't know, and the patient doesn't know. It's sealed somewhere like an Academy Award envelope, No one knows the answer. And you do that for 15,000 in one group and 15,000 in the other. And then partway through that phase three, you look and see, okay, of these 15,000, who got what you wanted to outline in phase one, who came down with some side effects that you outlined in phase one, and in the other group, who got what you outlined in phase one, who came down with side effects that you outlined in phase one, and you compare the two groups. Still not revealing the answer of who got what. But along the way, you don't know who got what. The patient doesn't know, and they'll just kind of report things every day, day-to-day life. That way, there's no bias. Oh, if you got the vaccine, maybe you behave differently than if you didn't. So you can't have the patient know, you can't have the investigator know. And,
right.
And that phase three can take some time. That's the thing. That's why it's taken so long, because if the data's looking promising, you still need a little more time to organize the data.
Yep. That's, I think, one thing that a lot of people need to know is that testing these vaccines is very important and also very time consuming, very difficult. And that's also why it's such a big deal that some vaccines have passed certain levels of testing. because it also really gives confidence into these vaccines becoming the real vaccine that's being distributed.
Yeah, you got to allow a little time to see if it worked and to see if side effects happen. And then, it could be medicines too. I mean, does this cholesterol medicine work, or does this? And you got to allow some time. In 3 months, your cholesterol's gone from A to B. You can't just do it the next day. It's got to take some time. And so, vaccines, new drugs, whatever, take some time. It's just the nature of what medications do, what medicine is.
We have a nice question from the chat. How do they determine who gets the vaccine first?
Are we talking trial, or are we talking like once it's available? We haven't.
I think we're talking once it's available.
Yeah. Once it's available. Okay, so let's talk about availability. We've talked about these vaccines now for the COVID that the Pfizer and Moderna have put out some really effective vaccines. At the time of their phase 3 trial, they were confident in the phase 2 data, that they thought that the phase 3 data would be really strong to the point where the FDA would approve it. So during the phase 3 trial, not only were they conducting the trial and analyzing the data, they were manufacturing the vaccine in the factory at the same time. So when the vaccine was approved, it was ready for distribution to a certain number of the population. Most of the time when the FDA approves something, they say, okay, this looks good, go make it now. And that takes another 6 months to a year ramping up production. Well, in this case, the production was going on simultaneously as the phase 3 trial, so that when the FDA approves it, 20 million doses or 40 million doses for 20 million people are available. Who are those 20 million people? Frontline healthcare workers in hospitals and in ERs, and older, riskier patients, patients with pre-existing conditions, and nursing home patients. That will take up the first 20 million. Those are what's ready now. 20 million patients at 40 million doses. To my understanding, this vaccine from Pfizer and Moderna is a 2 injection vaccine.
That's right.
One at day 0, the second at day 21, and then you'll get pretty good immunity, I guess, by day 50, something like that.
Interesting. So it takes almost 2 months for the vaccines to have an effect, which means during those 2 months, you have to be very sure you have to still be aware to avoid COVID-19. You're still doing what you're doing. It's maybe not day 50. It's more like it could be day 42 or something. But but there's that 3-week separation, and then there's still another month or so to go after that. And you're still, social distancing and the whole thing. There's no change in your behavior yet. Right. It would be really unfortunate if these vaccines, once they started being distributed to the more general public, that COVID infections would ramp up because people are seeing each other too early before the vaccines are ready. Right. So what you want to do is, get those healthcare folks vaccinated, get the elderly, pre-existing conditions folks vaccinated. In the meantime, the manufacturers churning out more and more doses of the vaccine. So eventually, you'll get the next 50 million folks. Who are those? Well, maybe their ages 50 to 70, or with other kinds of things. And then, so I mean, I kind of have a sense of the timetable. I don't know if we wanted to discuss that yet, but that's kind of where we're headed. Exactly. And it is very important. It's very important that the healthcare providers get these vaccinations first, because not only are they being exposed through their work all the time, if they were to get sick and they were to get infectious, then not only would they, of course, be unable to care for people, any people that they did care for could have gotten the disease from them. Yeah, they're like vectors. They're bouncing around. So you want to protect them, which in turn is protecting
all other patients in the hospital because the means of transmission is then cut off at the pass. So
Exactly.
you're helping more people than just the healthcare workers themselves. Yes, as a healthcare worker, when you are not at work, you're protected outside. But the point is to protect the patients in there from the healthcare workers jumping around patient to patient, which is happening now,
We have another question from the chat about the effective rate of vaccines. How do they figure out the effective rate of vaccines?
Excellent question. So the phase 3 trials, you have, 30,000 patients, 15,000 patients got the vaccine, and 15,000 patients got placebo.
Right.
Then, over the subsequent several months, those patients were told, "Go live your life, do what you do. Don't run into COVID, don't run away, just live." When we talk about vaccines, the trial is not give the patient the vaccine and then give them COVID and see who gets it and who doesn't. No.
Okay.
Give them the vaccine and then go live your life like you normally would. In 3 months, or whatever the time frame was, it was about 3 months. Then they look at the data in the vaccinated group, in the control group, in the patients who got just the saline. 160, I think it was 162 cases of COVID arose in that 15,000 patient group. Okay.
The 15,000 that got a saline injection.
Of the 15,000 that got saline, they came down with 162 cases of COVID.
Right.
So whatever that percentage is, but that's not the number where we're getting at. In the vaccinated group, the 15,000 patients, only 9 came down with COVID. Okay. So you take the total number of COVID cases, which are the 162 plus the 9, that's about 171. 162, I get my point is 9 out of that 171 came down with it, and that comes down to about 5 point something percent, which means it's 90% better than the other group, and that's where they get the.
Interesting.
You know what I mean? Yeah.
Okay,
so it's 90% more effective than getting you got a 5% chance of getting it if you got vaccinated, and or of the people, 95 were vaccinated and 5 were not. So there's your difference.
Exactly. And you know what? This actually reminds me of my statistics math class that I'm taking, because statistics is obviously, clearly from this demonstration, that it's very complicated because it's not as easy as saying 90% of the people that got a vaccine didn't get COVID. It's of the people that did get COVID in the control group, 90% of those got prevented from happening.
Yeah, of the total COVID patients, what percent got vaccinated and which did not? 95% were vaccinated. They were protected. Just this many got vaccinated, this many were not. That's the difference of the 90%.
I see. Okay. That's a nice clarity, I guess, to.
Yeah. Which compares to the flu shot, which is about 50 to 60% effective.
Right. Yeah, the flu shot, much lower. Now Pfizer / BioNTech. You mentioned this already, where you have to have a double dose, but also what's very concerning, is that vaccine has to be kept at a negative 80 degrees Celsius temperature.
Yeah.
That is very cold. In fact, I think there's probably going to be some logistic holes to jump through because of the amount of refrigeration you need, the technology that you need in order to transport such things across the country. Yeah, it's
got to be transported in that kind of cold temperature. It can go for about 5 days at normal refrigeration. So if you're going to bring it to distribution, you got to use it on the public within 5 days of it arriving at your pharmacy. It'll be transported at the low temperature. But once you bring it up to normal refrigeration, you've got 5 days to use it, or else it decomposes, or it doesn't. Basically decomposes.
All right.
It's a what they call a volatile molecule. Heat will destroy it, and it doesn't have to be that hot. It could be
No, it doesn't.
minus 30 degrees Celsius instead of minus 80.
Okay. Luckily, I don't think any vaccines are going to be expired while they're being refrigerated, because I think all the vaccines are going to be used within 4 days.
That's the thing. It's going to be demand. So what's going to happen is you're going to need to make an appointment, or you're going to have to find you just can't walk in and get one. You're going to have to make an appointment to get your vaccine when it's available to everybody at your neighborhood, Walgreens or whatever.
Mm-hmm. All right, so that's very important to know, is that you have to set these appointments. It's not like the flu shot where you kind of just walk in and get one.
Right. So my guess is that, not my guess, I mean, it's an educated guess. So, it's a little bit of a deduction. But by the end of this year, early January, those healthcare workers and the elderly folks I was talking about will get their vaccines, late December, early January. Then into February and March, it'll open it up to other folks with pre-existing conditions, and places that and you may have to make an appointment, either it's at Walgreens or at a doctor's office. Then more in the spring, like April, May, that's when the Walgreens will have it, and you can make your appointment to get it. And to get everybody done, it's going to take a couple months then. So by June or July, you're going to see, hopefully your 70% of the population get their vaccinations, and put a big dent in the virus.
That would be very nice. And because there are multiple types of vaccines coming from different companies, this person in the chat has a question. Do you think your doctor will have a choice of which vaccine from which company he thinks is best for you?
Maybe not immediately, but eventually, yes.
When more data is collected.
When more data and more availability. And the first two are pretty good, but there are a bunch more on the horizon. And, who knows, in a year from now and going forward, there may be, this year we're doing one of two or three choices because it's so there's going to be some options there. But in the beginning, it's kind of narrow with these two for sure coming out. And they're good and they're safe. And it's been looked at by the FDA. It's been looked at by an independent group not associated with the FDA. You would think the FDA, it would be fair and honest about it, and they will be, But just to be sure, the independent group has looked over their shoulder and made sure everything's on the up and up, and it has been, and looks like it's safe and ready to go.
That's nice. In fact, one of these companies that it has been in the news, I guess, is Moderna.
Yeah.
Moderna. And what's interesting about that vaccine is that it can be in the fridge for up to 30 days instead of 5 days. Which, I mean, like we said like a couple minutes ago, it might not actually matter that much because there's going to be such a demand.
Yeah, but it may make it easier to distribute. And the Moderna one is the one that's a little bit more effective at 94 point something percent,
right?
Which is tremendous. These 90% is tremendous. It could have easily been that this vaccine trials could have come out and said, it's 15% effective, so we got to go back to the drawing board. We would have been in this mess for 6 months without even hope coming for 6 months.
Yeah.
But it just so happened that these two companies came up with 90% effective vaccines, and this Moderna one can be stored at not such a cold temperature and given out. It still is a 2-dose vaccine process, but it will be very effective. And I'll tell you, I'm a doctor in private practice. I'm not in the ER, but I do make hospital rounds, and I'm in the hospital. But if I'm considered a frontline healthcare worker and I can get one of the earlier doses, I'm right there in line. I'll pull down my pants and they can shoot me in the fanny.
Yep. I mean, it really. I'm sure there's tons of doctors who wouldn't. I mean, you kind of just said it for a little bit of exaggeration, but it might not be exaggeration for a lot of doctors because they're in the front lines in the ER seeing
Yeah,
these people and the effects of COVID-19,
that's
and they know how serious it is.
exactly right. You got to look at what's going on out there. You know, this is not the measles where maybe you know someone with the measles. I don't know. I don't know if I've ever met anybody with the measles. And if you don't want a measles vaccine, okay, it maybe 1 in 1,000 people get measles. This is everybody's getting this. So
Yeah,
this is huge. You got to jump in and take it.
exactly. And it can be sometimes easy to forget that because really sick cases of COVID-19 have to go to the hospital, that also means that they're kind of out of sight in a way, as
Right.
in the people who are very sick with COVID-19 aren't really being seen by the general public as often because they're sick. That also means that people can kind of forget how bad this disease is. I doubt you're going to be allowed to go into an ER and take a tour of the patients, but you kind of just have to trust the healthcare workers on this one.
Right, and I think that's why it's spiking these days because the folks who are out there getting it don't see the sick people or don't see the consequences, so they're tired of it. They're like, "What is this vaccine? What is this pandemic all about anyway? I'm done with it." And they go, they had their Halloween party or they have their group
Thanksgiving.
gatherings and stuff, and those are the folks that are coming down with it because they don't see the sick patients. They don't have they don't go to the nursing homes or, maybe they have a grandparent who's staying home, but they're not seeing the sick people. So they're out and about. And so that numbers are spiking where the sick folks are in the ER. Like you said, you're not going to have access to seeing those guys who are in the ICUs and the general public don't see them. So they don't think it's really serious. And they go and the numbers are spiking because of that.
I just had a thought. This reminds me of actually decades ago, decades ago in the Vietnam War. I just remember that journalists were a very big part of that time period. And I'm curious now, what if journalists probably wouldn't be allowed to go into the ER for their safety, but what if a journalist were to be able to go in there in the front lines of this medical war
Yeah.
and really bring out all these gruesome symptoms and people that are dying from this disease? I wonder how much of an impact that would have.
Yeah, CNN had a special. This was early on
Oh,
in April. They did a thing on SUNY Downstate, the hospital in Brooklyn, and how they were overwhelmed and like that. So they did like a 1 or 2 part piece, just like you're talking about on that. It was
wow.
pretty moving. So there was something like that back then. We're probably due for another one of those to
Yeah,
give
reminder.
a sense of reality and to kind of quote scare people into staying home. So it's not out and about so much. So that's kind of where we're standing. But this vaccine data is very exciting, and I'm hoping everybody takes it. I don't know if you were going to ask this question, but I wanted to address there's going to be a segment of the population that is anti-vaccine.
Right.
And it's a little bit of apples to oranges here to some of the other things when you give vaccines to your kids. Like I said, the measles or the polio or the those are diseases. Those are like myth diseases in the first place. Those are
Right.
like, do you really know anyone who gets that? If you skip,
Exactly. I mean,
so
smallpox is a myth disease now because it's been
yeah,
eradicated.
so it's different. This disease is out there like crazy, and you've seen the effects of it. Like if you get measles, you got spots on your face, you'll be fine. This, you can get really sick and die from this. So with a 90% efficacy rate, I would say, get the vaccine. Make
Hmm.
so that the virus, there's enough of us out there that can corner the virus, and the virus then has no happy home to hang out in, and it just fizzles
Exactly.
out. If we get 300 million people who can kill off this virus, the virus will go, where do I go now? And that's the
Right.
end of him, right?
Exactly. That's how viruses survive, is by always infecting somebody.
Right.
And so if you just make everybody unable to be infected, then the virus cannot perpetuate, and then it's gone.
Yeah.
And then
So
nobody has to get vaccinated again, and that's what happened to smallpox.
yeah, and if this virus, you get really sick. So the anti-vax people either get with the program or get this virus and get real sick, and who knows what that'll do for you. It'll do a lot worse for you than
Right.
the vaccine will in the long term. I'll
I mean,
guarantee.
I hate to mention this, but it's just like natural selection. Oh God.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, that's what this virus kind of is. It is kind of like that. And if we didn't have the vaccine, let's say it was a bad percent, and we were still kind of going, eventual herd immunity, that's what would happen. After
yeah.
the last people standing are the ones who could handle it, and it weeded out the elderly and the sick, and they're gone, and now evolution played a role, right?
One thing that I almost forgot to mention was how these new vaccines are using a new technology. They're using mRNA technology, which is messenger RNA.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if you happen to know anything more about that.
Well, in these cases, the mRNA is like a blueprint or a sequencing on how to build proteins
Okay.
within the virus or of the virus. The key component of the virus are these proteins, and the mRNA then is in the vaccine. It's injected, and then it starts to produce these proteins in your body. But it's not the virus; it's the proteins. The body recognizes those proteins and then develops the antibodies against the virus because it's the property of the virus. But it's not the virus itself. So you're not going to be infected with the virus. They're not injecting virus. They're injecting this mRNA, a recipe to make protein. So the proteins are made in the body, released, and your immune system then recognizes these proteins as something weird and will then make antibodies against the virus. And it's the mRNA is a long sequence of amino acids, if you know your biochemistry, and it's the sequence of how to make these proteins.
Wow.
That's the key of this vaccine. There's other ways to do vaccines. These two are going with that.
Wow, this is really cool. I was kind of wondering last night how messenger RNA would be involved in this, and this is really cool. You're basically doing only a portion of what the virus wants to do, because the virus wants to inject its DNA or RNA, depending on the virus, into a human cell, which then starts replicating more viruses. But in this case, we are putting a part of the virus genetic code into our cells, but we're only putting a small portion of it, so it's not deadly. However, there's enough of it to where our immune system builds immunity to it. And I just think that's really cool and fascinating. Right. And what's also really funny is that I believe it was Moderna that they were actually developing this technology for cancer. But then when this pandemic struck, they switched their focus to COVID-19, which ended up paying out very nicely for everybody. And so I also wonder if after this pandemic's over, all of this new research into mRNA might actually, we might get more cancer research, we might get more cancer treatments because of this, and that would be great.
And it's a slick way of doing it because you don't have to inject the pathogen, or you can kind of get the answer with a kind of the end around way, but it's still the true answer as the data is showing. That's it's the mRNA molecule, the spine of the mRNA. It's hard to describe it, but they're amino acids lined up in a row connected by a spine. Imagine
like you have a
vertebra bones with all going down. It's that spine that is very sensitive to the temperature. So if you raise the temperature of the Pfizer mRNA, that spine's going to break apart, and then you got no vaccine. Whereas the Moderna one, that spine can withstand the higher temperatures, and that's the difference in why they're different, efficacy. So it's the amino acids are the same. It's the molecules along the spine that are different.
Mm-hmm. All right, that's really cool.
Advantages to the other one that I'm not aware of, or else they wouldn't have made it that way. So you got to know what you're dealing with there.
Yeah, I think we actually have a comment from the chat, which I believe is correct, where there's multiple biotech companies using this new mRNA technology, but it's still new. And I believe there's only one that was doing cancer research, and it might have been BioNTech.
Right.
Don't like use these words for a research paper if you're gonna do that. Yeah. But because I'm not a primary source. Yes. Okay. Now we do have a lot of information here about other vaccines and other diseases, previous ones. However, I'm wondering if we should take that into another show, a part 2, perhaps.
Perhaps we can get into polio, measles,
yes.
The flu, the other things you take in the tetanus, things like that. That are different kinds of vaccine, been around for years and been tried and true. People didn't want to take the polio vaccine at first either, but now it's everybody gets it.
Exactly. What else was there? Oh well. Was there anything else that you wanted to bring up before we slow down the show for today?
The time, the data's good. The data's been looked at legit. Yes, it's a little quick, but that's because they did that manufacturing and phase 3 simultaneously.
Right.
So you're going to see some availability early on. The safety data is good. It's been checked out. So I would urge everybody to get this vaccine when it's available to you so we can return to some kind of normalcy. You still might need to wear a mask for a little bit.
Oh, yeah.
But the restaurants, the movie theaters, the sports arenas and the restaurants and concerts, all that kind of stuff are going to come back if you guys get your vaccine.
Exactly.
We make sure this virus doesn't have anywhere to go.
And hold your excitement when you do get the vaccine, because you have to wait for it to actually start working. Right. You don't want to...
It's a 2-month process, basically.
Exactly. We do not want a backfire of people thinking they're immune and then spreading COVID-19 again and getting more people sick before they're ready to be immune. So right. I remembered what I wanted to bring up. Next week is Thanksgiving. And I'm certain people...
Happy Thanksgiving.
Yeah, happy Thanksgiving. And of course, we have to... we discussed this 2 weeks ago in a show where if you wanted to have a Thanksgiving party, or you knew someone who wanted to have a Thanksgiving party, you would have to get all your members to quarantine for 2 weeks beforehand. Now it's too late to start a 2-week quarantine. So unfortunately, you have to try to withstand from meeting people in Thanksgiving and having food. But for all of you who did do 2-week quarantines for all your members, have a good time, happy Thanksgiving, but still be careful.
Yeah, and they're really still limiting it to households, or if you're quarantining, right, you can go. But you don't want 8, 10, 12 people indoors from different households. Certainly not that.
No.
You want a few. You want a few people outdoors, okay. But the bottom line is the household. I mean, the household's just 4 or 5 people, 2, 4 or 5 people. How many people live in a household? It could be kind of a lonely Thanksgiving this year. It's just 1 year. Exactly. I got relatives who are staying home. It stinks, but you got to do it. But if you've been able to quarantine and can get to your any Thanksgiving house, still be careful, still wash hands, still wear masks, still distance.
Mm-hmm. We have to make sure that we stay safe in the final stretch of this pandemic. And the final stretch is going to last until late spring or even summer, like you were saying, the amount of time it takes for vaccines to be produced and distributed.
As I was saying before, everybody who wants a vaccine will be able to get it sometime in June, July, summertime of 2021. And by then, we'll see a nice change in the way things go, and we'll be getting real close to what we were like in 2019.
We have one final question from the chat. Are all vaccines 2 parts?
No, some are 1, some are 3, some are 2. It depends on the disease, how the vaccine works. The flu shot's a one-time thing. The measles, mumps, and rubella, I believe, is a 2 or 3. The hepatitis B is 2. So you got that, and some of the kid ones are 3. Tetanus needs a booster after 15 years. I mean, everybody's different. Everything's different.
Right. And of course, it's because of how the vaccines are made and how they work with the immune system.
Yeah,
Because your
the
immune
nature of the
system,
virus, the way the virus replicates. How does the virus replicate? What's the best way to prevent it or to fake your body out on each particular virus?
All right. Well, I think that's a nice place to end off the show for today. If there were any questions that we couldn't get to while live, you can email us at myworldsciencetv@gmail.com. And if you happen to be in the LA area and you would like to see Dr. Sherman for an appointment, then his number is in the chat. It is 310-659-9600, or you can email his office, which is towergastro@gmail.com. We do these once a week at 5 p.m. PST, usually on Thursdays, but for this one, we had to make an exception. And until next week, stay safe.